Hey everyone, Will Brink here, brinkzone.com. Discussion I want to talk about today was a show on 60 Minutes that's getting a fair amount of attention, specifically because some of the claims made by a medical doctor, supposedly an obesity specialist, very highly credentialed woman, so that she made some of these claims really surprised a lot of people, including some in the medical profession too. And what I'm going to try to do is actually use a little video from it. I don't usually use videos or insert videos in my own videos, so hopefully I do this properly today. It's not too clunky, but I want people to hear some of what she says with in her own words. I don't want to put words in her mouth. I highly recommend watching the entire interview. It's only like 15 minutes long, and I'll link it underneath here. But basically, what another doc, but her in particular, basically are telling people is that diet and exercise have basically no impact on their weight loss. That none of it is their responsibility or their fault or their willpower and so forth, and it's all in their genes. Basically, she makes this claim straight up that something like 80–90% of the weight is genetic, and they essentially have no control over it, and then leads into, of course, the new medications, weight loss medications that she is recommending and the other doc is recommending. And understandably, that has raised some eyebrows, even among, like, say, the medical community. But for myself, I think it's almost a sort of pinnacle of demonstrating how poorly the medical community writ large deals with and treats and understands diabetes, obesity. And it's sort of the poster child for all that is wrong with their approach to obesity, and the fact that they don't have much success with it. And I'm sure a lot of medical doctors were a bit frustrated, but it's just that obesity being such a multifactorial problem takes a multifactorial approach. Now, sure, in isolation, in a vacuum, yes, obesity is a matter of excess calories intake versus outgoing. That has not changed unless somebody has changed the laws of thermodynamics, which they have not. But in the real world, it's easy to say that, but it's a lot more complicated than that, and we all know that. However, this claim that she makes and other claims she makes are not supported by the data. I don't know where she's pulling it from. The role that genetics plays in weight and weight gain is a bit of a moving target, which is to say that it's sort of all over the place as far as what they find, what the contribution is. However, most data, most papers that you read still tend to conclude that genetics alone play a pretty small part in weight of people, and it is still mostly environmental, i.e., what they eat, how they, what they're doing, and all that. So she makes a bunch of claims that I say were kind of eye-raising, but again, to me at least, somebody who's been in this business for 30 plus years, worked with hundreds of people directly, thousands, if not millions of people indirectly through my articles in the various magazines and videos and all that. And I had a large forum when I was selling my ebook, Fat Loss Revealed, which I sold thousands of copies. We had a very active forum. So again, lots of feedback from people as to what was working and what didn't work, and if they did their part with the nutrition and exercise and so forth, the results they got. and so forth. So I'm in a pretty good position to have an opinion, I think. Not just, again, a keyboard warrior offering some opinion, but again, medical profession, medical doctors in general sort of compartmentalize weight loss, don't do a very good job, I think, of seeing the bigger picture, and have come to concluded, and some of them have concluded publicly that, diets are nutrition. I don't want to say diets. Again, diets is a loaded uh, term. I probably shouldn't say diet because it is a loaded term. I should just say nutrition or what have you. But anyway, have stated quite publicly that exercise and nutrition don't work, and only drugs and bypass surgery works. I've actually seen that by, so again, some very prestigious people, and I find that really depressing. I find that disturbing, and I think it really borders on medical negligence. You're telling people that they really don't have any control over it, and that is simply false. Okay, so I'm going to go over to her. Hopefully this works, and then we'll come back. But I want people to see this in their own words. I do recommend so let's see. I'm going to bring in the stream. Okay, you see this. I'm going to turn it on just a couple of minutes so you guys can see. So I'm not putting any words in this person's mouth. Here we go.
Right. But the number one cause of obesity is genetics. That means if you are born to parents that have obesity, you have a 50 to 85% likelihood of having the disease yourself, even with optimal diet, exercise, sleep management, stress management. So when people see families that have obesity, the assumption is, what are they feeding those kids?
Yeah.
They're doing something wrong. Actually, do you know this? 79 to 90% of physicians in the United States have significant bias.
Okay, so I'm going to take her out. So you saw this with your own two eyes and your ears. Listen to that. Not I don't know exactly where she's getting these numbers. Even after I watched the show, I went and looked to find what she's talking about. But when you're talking about when she's saying 50 to 80%, you're born to parents, and notice she said regardless of your nutrition, your exercise, and your sleep. I have no idea where she's getting these numbers because it's not true. It's absolutely false. We know, again, if kids are in a household with obese parents, that obviously have a very high likelihood of being obese themselves, and that is, again, due mostly, again, to what they're eating and their activity levels and so forth. To say even in the face of healthy diet, proper caloric intake and so forth, don't know where that's coming from, and it is false. That is not to say, and I'd say the information that she's offering there is not genetic. This is not genotype or genetic studies. This is correlational research. Again, obviously you'd expect a child that grows up in a household with obese parents to be obese. I don't think that exactly. Now, how she came to add, even in the face of, again, good nutrition and exercise and sleep and what have you, and those other variables, I don't know. So I really think this is really a tragedy for her to view that. Again, where she gets the information, I don't know. I think what is important to note, and we're going to get to what I think is some motivation here in a second, because it obviously involves drugs. So a couple of things that they miss, or at least I think in general, the weight loss clinics and the weight loss doctors, and that I know who have had success, or that I've looked at, are other people, myself, whatever, who have really had success with people, again, are treating weight loss from all of the variables that are the problem. And it's not obviously just eating. It has to do with the psychology of it. There are actually some pretty good studies on the psychology of weight loss. That is, the people that lost weight and kept it off, and what their psychological view and their approach was. I'll link an article below. The way that people view things as far as how much control they have, what they call locus of control. The people and the doctors, whatever, that address all of those aspects, family life, behavior changes, that's a big one, have great successes. those that just tell people, they go into the office and just tell people to eat less and exercise more, as if they didn't know that. And then they usually refer them over to nutritionists who, that's a whole other discussion. But often the nutritionist really doesn't help them all that much as far as what they tell them to do, and sends them off. And yeah, I think one thing she would agree with, and everybody watching this would agree with, who's had this experience, and the data agrees with this, is that getting the weight off is not actually the difficult part. Keeping the weight off is the difficult part. And again, the data is very clear on that. Keeping the weight off is another matter. Okay. And like I say, we have good data for that. And again, I tend to think the most overlooked aspect of all of this is the psychological aspect. You will look at diet book after diet book after diet plan and so on and so forth, and almost none of them that I have seen address that elephant in the room, because it's messy. Psychology is messy, but I very rarely see anybody adequately address that. And you have to address that adequately, just like anything else, whether it's whether it's alcohol or something else. There is always a behavioral aspect and a psychological aspect that has to be addressed, and that's something I've always been interested in. So I've always focused on. When I had a private training business way back in the day in the 90s, I had the business cards of two therapists, because I would also be very clear to them that I'm not a therapist. I didn't mind talk. Of course, we would talk nutrition and they would tell me what they're eating. But if I had a sense that they were struggling with eating issues on a psychological level, I had two cards. I had a woman who was a psychologist who specialized in eating disorders, and I had another doctor who just was a general psychologist. And if I felt that they would benefit, I would give them a card, and I say, I recommend you speak to somebody professionally, and it always was a benefit. And again, I was also clear that that was not an area that I was equipped to go into in depth. Again, I could give them basic support, but it's a complicated topic. So you need to watch that not documentary, whatever, that interview. So here's what's going on. Let me give you the short of this, and this is really, I think, where the problem is. There's a lot of pressure by some medical doctors, obviously her and the other ones, and of course the pharmaceutical industry and so forth. What they're trying hard to do is categorize weight or obesity as a disease. This is what they want to do, obviously, such as diabetes as a disease, and they're really pushing hard to categorize weight loss obesity as a disease. And this is unfortunately, this 60 Minutes segment was literally just one long setup and pharmaceutical industry commercial, from what I could tell. And so if they can get obesity literally as a disease, there is billions, if not trillions of dollars involved in this, in the development of, obviously, in medications, in insurance payments, funding, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of money involved here. And they only very, very briefly at the end mentioned that the two guests on the show are consultants to the pharmaceutical industry. Now, so if they can get obesity listed as a disease, it will be treated as a disease. And of course, what will happen is that it will end up being treated as a chronic disease, just as they do with diabetes and others. There won't really be, I don't think there will really be, again, an effort to quote unquote cure the disease of obesity. They will manage it as they do with some other diseases. I mean, let's go with diabetes. Again, most of the time, all they do is manage diabetes. Well, diabetes is a curable disease. It can be reversed. Now, I'm saying that's a general statement. There's a lot of moving parts into that statement, i.e., for example, the earlier you address diabetes, the easier it is to reverse, and so forth. There's a lot going on there. But just having said, you can reverse diabetes in people with just nutrition and exercise and some other doodads, and they don't do that. Very few, again. So if they get obesity recognized as disease, and now they treat it as a chronic disease with medications, because according to her, as you heard, even with exercise, even with nutrition and so forth, it doesn't matter. It's all in your genes, and you have no control over it. And that is just the most horrific message to send to people. So if they can pull that off, again, you're talking about just a tremendous amount of money. Now, let's talk about these drugs specifically. There's two that are getting a lot of attention, but the one in particular in this show that they're discussing is getting quite a bit of attention. I'll list them underneath the video, and of course, one thing they do mention is that they cost a lot of money, thousands of dollars a month. That's actually not true. They cost that kind of money if you're using the brand name, and of course, if you're getting in the U.S., because in the U.S. our drug prices are so out of control. Which is another topic for another day. However, there are various doctors that you can probably find and other sources. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to get myself in trouble, but just FYI, if you do a little searching around, you can find that medication for a lot less. Not inexpensive, but a whole lot less than that type of money. So that, again, to me, is the pharmaceutical industry talking through this doctor and through 60 Minutes and what have you to make sure people are only looking for the expensive version. But that peptide can be found for considerably less. Just FYI. So let's talk about those drugs. What I don't want to do is, I'm not trying to talk people out of pursuing the use of medications to help with their weight loss efforts. I am not going to I don't think it's right to put a dividing line to say, you can do it all with diet, nutrition, and exercise, and willpower, and so forth and so forth. You shouldn't have to. I mean, look, if there are medications that will help you that are safe, and that's a big one, and these drugs actually do appear fairly safe. If the risk to benefit is in favor of using some drugs to make your life easier and reduce your appetite or whatever the mechanism may be, I'm all for it. I'm not trying to again, I know that weight loss, permanent weight loss, and you've got to stick to that in your head listening to this. Weight loss is almost irrelevant because, again, if it doesn't stay off, it's even worse. I mean, the weight loss yo-yo thing is even worse, probably even worse for you than being weight stable and healthy as you can be, weight stable versus going up and down. Because every time you go up and down, you lose lean body mass. When you put the weight back on, what comes back on is body fat. And over successive cycles of weight gain and weight loss, you actually become body composition wise, you actually get fatter. So I'm not trying to talk you guys out, anybody's watching this, of just saying you don't need medications. There's no reason to pursue medications. I'm not saying that at all. I think that, again, if done as part of an overall plan that we're talking about of nutrition and exercise and the psychological behavioral aspects and so forth, these can be very beneficial medications. And I do know, and speaking with and working with some people that are on the specific medication that is being talked about, that is quote unquote the secret of Hollywood and so forth. For them, this is such garbage when they use those terms, because all it does is, again, make people say, oh, if the Hollywood's using it, I've got to get my hands on it. That entire segment of 60 Minutes was literally clearly written by some sort of PR person at a pharmaceutical company. Anyway, there is nothing wrong with the use of the two medications that are the most popular in terms of, if they are part of the overall larger picture, they are definitely helpful. And I'm not saying to avoid them, because, again, they do appear to be fairly safe. Obviously, obesity onto itself is a risk factor you have to address. It's a risk factor for diabetes. It's a risk factor for heart disease. It's a risk factor for some cancers. It is a risk factor for Alzheimer's, and on and on and on. So you have to balance the risk of obesity with the drug you're taking. And from what I'm seeing, these drugs look fairly safe. So, however, I do not think that anybody that saw that show or is out looking for them is, if they're thinking, okay, none of it's my fault, out of my control, none of the dieting, none of the nutrition that I followed, and so on and so forth ever mattered, and all I need is this drug, which I think if you're watching that show, it would be pretty easy to fall into that trap. That's bad. It's wrong. It's not true. And now we have to come back to the permanent weight loss. Now what? Okay, you lose. You get on these meds. They help you lose a bunch of weight because you're doing all the other things you need to do. And now what? Are you on the drugs for the rest of your life, or are you going to come off them and hopefully maintain? This is where we're getting what I was talking about. They're trying to set up a disease model to treat the obesity as a chronic disease and have you on these drugs permanently. That is obviously a monster cash cow for them. um, you're now more or less, somewhat trapped. I mean, again, a lot of this is again up to the person, but if the person, especially, let's say they're relying almost exclusively on these drugs because now they've just been told by a quote unquote expert that even with good nutrition and exercise and so forth, that it's all in their genes, well, then they're really going to be trapped on these drugs because they haven't done any of the other essential aspects of permanent weight loss. So I may be walking a line here, as far as not just saying these drugs are bad, avoid them. I think that's what I've seen some other people say, and I don't think that's correct. Again, uh, weight loss on paper is easy, but easy is not the same. Or sorry, gee, it's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. Permanent weight loss on paper is simple, i.e., eat less calories than you ingest. Get your regular exercise and so forth, but it's not easy. And I know that, and I don't want people to think that I'm pretending that it's easy because it's not. But you still have to address it from multifactorial angles to make it stick. That means your entire household has got to be on board. You can't be the only person trying to lose weight, and if everybody else is not helping you. Um, I give you like a personal story with one person I worked with again many years ago. This attorney, very wealthy attorney, very very successful attorney, had contacted me about his daughter. Now the attorney was a big guy. He was north of 300+ pound guy, and his daughter was now becoming obese. She was young kid, 8 or 9 years old, and he was worried about her. And he contacted me, and like a good father who really cared, and said, "Look, I can you help me with my daughter? Um, I'm worried about her. I don't want her to, suffer consequences of obesity, and she's, at that age where people are starting to tease her in school and so forth." And I said, "Yes." I said, "So, what are you eating? What do you eat?" And he said, "Well, this isn't about." "What do you mean? What am I? This isn't about me. This is about my daughter." And I said, "Look, you have to make the changes with your daughter because you cannot expect her to sit there and eat something different than you're eating. You are her mentor. You're the person she looks up to. You're the parent. And if you want to do this for your daughter and make this stick and make her not struggle with obesity for the rest of her life, and so forth, and not make her self-conscious about the fact that she's eating something different to lose weight and you're not, you have to do this with your daughter. You're going to have to do this together." And to his credit, he said, "Okay." He said, "You know what? You're right. I'm going to do whatever I have to do for her." And then we worked on their nutrition, and they're getting out and taking a walk together every day instead of him sending her out to go do something. And together, uh, they lost a bunch of weight, and their metabolic parameters all improved as you would expect. His glucose and his A1C. She was, I mean, as a little kid, her metabolic numbers were actually fine, but they weren't going to stay that way as she got older. But his metabolic numbers, his fasted glucose and his A1C and his blood pressure and all that, all got much better, and his life got better, and so did hers. And I do not think that wouldn't have happened if he had just sat down and said, "Okay." Saying, no matter how nice you say it, you cannot say to somebody or a kid that, "Hey, you're overweight, and we care about your health, and you're going to have to start eating these foods, and you're going to have to start doing this while we don't change our behaviors." So my point is that for anybody that really plans to keep it off, that this is a unfortunately, it has to your environment around you, the people around you, what you do with yourself. who you hang out with, and where places you go. These are all going to matter, especially in the early parts. Again, as time goes on, you'll be able to loosen up on that a bit. But I mean, even for myself, look, if I keep ice cream in the house, I'm going to eat it. I mean, this is, as long as I don't keep things in the house that probably should not be eating regularly, I usually I don't have a problem with them as far as like my impulse. If the impulse is there, I'll probably give into the impulse and I'll eat the ice cream or something I shouldn't eat. Um, don't need to eat. Now, I won't get into the car. The impulse will not get me in the car to drive over there to go get the ice cream. I can handle, no problem. But impulse control, is a big one. And sometimes these are little things. I mean, I'll do another show maybe to discuss. Sometimes there's some really small things you can do that actually do add up. But another show, another time. So watch that interview. I think it's really a disaster. I think it's really a shame, but I think the motivation under there is the fact that if they can get obesity listed as a disease and have a disease approach to it, where they are now, again, there's a lot of funding. Insurance companies start covering it, because right now insurance companies, like, they'll cover diabetes because of disease, but they usually often will not cover obesity because it's not a disease and so forth. So depends on the insurance company, different programs, but just, you'll see in the show that the one woman could not get that medication. The insurance company would not cover it, and they're getting better about it. So I think under the hood here, there's a real motivation for the medical community writ large to really just throw up their hands, in dealing with obesity. Because again, remember, there's a lot that we could cover here. They don't have much in the way of nutrition training. They just don't seem to really understand how to see the big picture as far as how to treat people, I think, with obesity. And their numbers, of course, the number of obese people we have obviously bears that out. And the doctors and the clinics and so forth that I have seen that have had great success in getting weight off people and keeping it off, again, have had that multi-pronged approach, that knowing that you've got to deal with all of it. And again, the behavioral aspects, the psych aspects are a key part of that. So I think that's all I have to say on the matter. Please like this vid and subscribe if you like what I'm talking about. And hopefully I'll see you guys on the brink soon.